is it time to reset the hobby? And that is lingo that is often used in Clubhouse, where there's a room going on and it goes off in all directions. Someone will say, let's reset the room and kind of start fresh. So your comments that brought up that or made me think of that wording for a title or a topic tonight. Is it time to reset the hobby? Can you explain what your mindset is with respect to that?
Yes, reset is a good way to put it. I'm thinking also reset, and then to mix my metaphors, advance the ball. Reset and advance the ball. So, and here's what I mean by advance the ball. This is a bit that I've been refining over the last few podcasts that Josh and I have done. Michael Saylor was on Patrick Bet-David, a former guest of yours. He was on Patrick Bet-David's podcast not long ago, and he was explaining why he decided to allocate hundreds of millions of dollars of his company's retained earnings into Bitcoin in the summer of 2020. And he said he looked carefully at a number of asset classes. He was primarily focused with getting the money out of the cash format. He didn't want to hold cash. He had become convinced of the likelihood of inflation, rapidly deteriorating the value of the cash, and he wanted to put the holdings into some other asset class, which is a common refrain, right, of the rise of alternative investing over the last 2 years, is that people are worried and leery of traditional ways of storing value, which would include cash and holding cash. And so he looked at a number of asset classes for where to park those hundreds of millions of dollars. He looked at real estate. He looked at art. He looked as well at Bitcoin. And the thing that convinced him on Bitcoin was that exponents of the Austrian School of Economics, which, like the Chicago School of Economics or, the Keynesian School of Economics, it's a tradition. It's an intellectual tradition. But it doesn't have much mainstream purchase outside of a few Ron Paul endorsements during his 2012 presidential campaign. But it's a legitimate school of thought that has intellectual forefathers and is taken seriously by scholars to some extent. And the Austrian School of Economics was an early adopter and developed a philosophy to support Bitcoin. And basically, the reason why those two overlap is because Austrian economics has always been in favor of non-fiat currencies. They're aggressively libertarian. They think that any force from the government is bad, and fiat currency is obviously enforced by the government. They're rugged individualists. They're very hardcore about freedom, personal liberty, and freedom. And Bitcoin lines up with that, because Bitcoin is this totally independent, decentralized currency that is theoretically free from from monetary policy. It's free from government manipulation and intervention, and so they really gravitated to it on a theoretical level. And so during 2020, when our economy was going through all sorts of weird machinations, Saylor really gravitated to these explanations that the Austrian economists were offering about what was happening and about the inflation that was coming. And because these smart people that he respected were endorsing Bitcoin as an alternative store of value, he went with it. He went with Bitcoin based on his respect for the scholarship and his agreement with the scholarship and the works of these philosophers and thinkers from the Austrian economics school. And so, in other words, this pocket of nerds who had been producing philosophy and scholarship on Austrian economics for decades and decades and decades ended up producing works that were more influential than any influencer in pop culture ever could be. They influenced this guy to park hundreds of millions of dollars into Bitcoin. And in sports cards, we have influencers and we have people who have associated themselves with the hobby as faces of the hobby, but we don't have those intellectual texts that can explain to people all of the virtues of our market and of our experience and of the history of our hobby. And I think it's high time that we start producing them and that we start giving some serious intellectual consideration to it. And I think Josh Luber started it with the manifesto. I think that's a good start, and we can take the baton and run from there. But so resetting the hobby, moving the ball forward means going back to first principles and developing our elevator pitch and our explanation for why this hobby is great, why it's been successful so far, and why the next time somebody like a Peter Saylor in the summer of 2020 wants to decide where to put his money, he would choose us. Because guess what? Had he chosen us, he would have done better than Bitcoin. Bitcoin went up between then and now about 4 point something times. For example, just the football card market in general is up 6 times. So if you just had purchased football cards in general, you would have done 50% better than Bitcoin did. Had you bought Tom Brady cards, you would have done twice as well as Bitcoin did. So we need to tell these stories. Like, we are just sitting on a treasure chest of great data and great information. And we think Card Ladder plays a small role in helping to legitimize and tell the story of our great hobby through data, but we also need linguistic exponents to put it into words and reduce it to text and help convince that next Michael Saylor that he should look seriously at sports cards.